Hey everybody, been an interesting couple of days. The other night, one of my older exes reached out to me to let me know that a mutual friend of ours had passed. So, that was a little upsetting, but we took a moment to catch up and realized there were some parallels, as far as health issues and things like that. So, but it was nice to catch up. And then today, I log in to Facebook. I get that gut punch. The Facebook memories. Yeah, it was a couple pictures of me and my recent ex. One of which was like my absolute favorite picture of us together. Um, and I reflected on again. It was at one time it was my absolute favorite picture of us together, and now it means nothing because now I know. I got to see the real her at the end, and I know it was all a lie. Still digs me a certain way. Uh, but then on the other hand, it kind of shows growth because, hear me out, um, I wasn't pining. You know, Before I was fighting that, I was back and forth. Again, that's part of the breaking the trauma bond. Is it's like an addiction. Like part of you wants to go back, and then the other part, knows no part of me wants to go back. So that's good. And then this morning, I was talking to somebody new, and I got to help talk them through something that they were going through that I had, ironically, recent experience with, which was going through an abusive relationship. And it's just parallels, you know. I always talk about it's about perspective and perception, and I don't know. There's something about the interactions, the how they played out. Um, so I decided tonight I'm going to give a little bit of testimony, which is some of my story, and nowhere near all of it because it's a very long story. I certainly do not look like what I've been through, um, but that's a choice. You know, some people go through things and they become both, the victim and the villain because they refuse to grow, or you become the victor and you rise above. Sometimes I do get stuck in that victim mentality. I'm still as susceptible as everybody else, um, but I usually outgrow it pretty quick. I don't like being stuck. Now that I've, discovered growth and change, and I know how to like make it a continuous process, I don't think I'm ever looking back. I don't ever want to stop. I always want to improve. And the way to do that is to get further into the Word, get a deeper understanding. So the other night I mentioned something about, one of my tattoos. This one here. It's all text. It's in like an old English font script. And it is the Old Knights Code, which says, "A knight is sworn to valor, his heart knows only virtue. His blade defends the helpless, his word speaks only truth. His shield shelters the forsaken, His courage gives hope to the despairing. His wrath undoes the wicked. His image brings peace. His code breaks the darkness. His legend brings light. Yes, all that is on my arm. And that has always meant, something to me in my life ever since, I've heard it. And I like to think of it, to me, it gives me vibes of a combination between the verses of the armor of God and the Beatitudes. So I'll read those to you and we'll compare notes. All right. Here's the armor of God, which is Ephesians 6, 10 through 20, which is also marked as my life verse in my Bible, by the way. That is my go-to. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet in the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith. That's why I always wear that. With which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. And take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance and supplication for all the saints. And for me, that utterance may be given to me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that in it I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. That speaks volumes to me. It's not just how to defend yourself, from evil, but it also reminds you of your responsibility. And that's important to me. Like I said, I'm glad to see this consequence culture that's going on in the world right now. Not because I'm happy to see what's happening to people, but I'm happy because it is forcing accountability, because you cannot have change without accountability, and things cannot stay how they've been. Things have to change. So again, that's only going to come from accountability. Alright, so the other one I have for you is the Beatitudes, which is Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 11. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So yeah, those are the two verses that I put together for the meaning of why that Knight's Code. It's a reminder. of, again, how one should conduct themselves. Someday I'll have to do like a written, like a breakdown, like I do my deep dive. I've been doing the deep dive Bible studies. I'm going to do that with this. The other thing I had, the other anecdotal story, I've talked about some of my experiences being institutionalized. And when God puts you places, it's usually a mutual situation. You are there to fulfill something on behalf of God, and you will find something there from somebody else that is a lesson sent from God for you to understand. There's 3 times somebody will come into your life. For a reason, for a season, or for your lifetime. Or theirs. And again, that I learned that from the same person that pointed me to, I struggled with some things in my life that I will never outlive. I'm accountable. I'm understanding of that, but it doesn't change the fact that it greatly and negatively impacts, the quality of my life and the ability that I have to do what I want to do. But again, that's consequences. Anyway, I struggled with that, and my friend that I made during that experience pointed me to the story of the thorn in the flesh. Which is 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10. And this is, for me, very powerful. Because again, it affected me. It had a great impact on me. It got me over something that, I thought I was going to carry forever. And again, I say it's about perspective and perception. I can't change that, but I can change the way I look at it, the way I apply it. So this is that story that taught me that lesson. And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. There were several parts of that. And that wasn't even that long, of a passage. And there was a lot of good nuggets in there. He's talking about there's this thorn in the flesh, which is some kind of ailment, and it never specifies it in the Bible, the story of what that was, but it was some kind of permanent disability and infirmity that he couldn't shake. And of course, God being the great healer, he said, God, take this burden from me. And God said, no. Because of his position, God did not want him to be exalted above his message. And if he was left complete, perfect, he ran into the possibility of letting pride overtake And when he realized that, he was thankful for it. And another great nugget there, my grace is sufficient for you. Sufficient means enough. And enough is enough. That's all you need. Just to know that grace is there, that forgiveness. That is life-changing. When it finally sinks in and really settles in and you can remember it, it will change your life. And then the second part of that, my strength is made perfect in weakness. And then at the very end, for when I am weak, then I am strong. There's that saying, when, you give up, and you say, God, I don't have it in me, I can't do it no more. That's when God goes, all right, now I can begin. And that's exactly what that is. You have to get out of your own way. You have to submit, surrender. It's not just a euphemism when we say, you got to turn your life over. And I have no regrets. It has absolutely been worth it. Again, I say all the time, there is distinctly evidence of the quality of my life compared to my walk in faith at that time of my life. Anytime I lax and I get sidetracked and I move away from church, my life gets absolutely miserable. All kinds of difficulties. But then, in the midst of those difficulties, when I am weak, when I'm beaten down and I'm giving up and I don't know what to do, is when I remember, hey, God's always there. He doesn't turn away from you. You turned away from him. Go back. And I do. And it's always those open arms. Because there's always a purpose. Again, the Bible never said life is going to be easy. Being a Christian does not make life easy. It makes it worth it. It makes it beautiful. It gives it purpose. And ironically, another friend I met in a similar situation to that taught me another phrase that I like to use sometimes. And it's, being a Christian doesn't make me sinless, it makes me sinless. So don't let that one go over your head. Again, there's that double edge there. You got to keep that humility. But you also got to stand firm on what you know to be truth. Above all else. That's what the gospel is. Truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That is absolutely true. And that's, again, the end of the armor of God. Speak boldly as I ought to speak. When you talk gospel, you say it with your whole chest. Don't shrink. Again, don't be, nasty about it. People have free will. If they want to turn it away, do not force. Whenever anybody says that, yes, it is our job as Christians to evangelize. It is our job as Christians to share the gospel. But again, we have to recognize God's gift It's free will. All we can do is live the way we're supposed to live to set a good example, and to make people curious and interested. Like, hey, I like what they got. I want some of that. You know? How is that person still standing after, everything they just went through? Or, how does that person stay so cheerful? That's the power of faith. Faith is extremely important. I recommend it for everybody. But that was this evening's message. That's what's been on my mind the last couple of days. Series of events and a little bit of good news. I heard from my dad earlier, and there is a strong possibility that he is coming home tomorrow. Again, he's still going to have to go up for more treatments, but they think he's at a stage where he can at least come home. So that'll be good. It'll be a lot easier to get over to visit him that way. The whole time he's been in the hospital, I only got offered rides twice, so, which I appreciate them both greatly. But again, when he's closer to home, I know I'll get, more opportunities. And again, despite what he's going through, he also, when we were talking earlier today, gave me that reminder, like, hey, you got to get out of your head. You're getting stuck in bad places. You got to focus more on, what I'm doing now with the Bible, with doing my studies and sharing the message. And he was absolutely right. Again, that fatherly advice doesn't just come from your heavenly Father, although it was passed through. We all have the potential to be a vessel, to be a messenger. One of the great repeating aspects in the Bible is God always takes people that you would never expect. He takes a nobody and makes them a somebody without consulting anybody. That is absolutely true. I've seen that with my own eyes. But again, that kind of strength, that kind of determination, you have to drive out fear. And the counteraction for fear is faith. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Fear, false evidence appearing real. Faith, falling all in to Him. That is your counteraction. If you are tired of living in this constant state of panic, anxiety, fear, your counteraction is faith. That's why I say faith is so important. They're the opposite ends of the same spectrum. Fear is doubt. Faith is trust. And that really has been the only thing that God has ever asked of anybody, is trust me. That's it. And once that falls into place, everything else starts coming together. But you have to, go through the experiences. For some people, that's as simple as, reading their Bible. For a lot of us, we have to go through what I call a baptism of fire. I think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that story. I'll have to bring that up again for one of the Bible studies as well. Long story short, 3 guys were put into a furnace. And, witnesses said there was 4 in there. Even though they only put 3 in, there was 4. And they came out completely unharmed. That was God and His protection. He'll make sure you walk through and come out the other side. You just got to trust. Trust in His plan, in His grace, in His mercy, in His love. It's so funny, and it's really starting to make sense to me now that I see the way things are playing out, right now in world events. The way people are reacting. And a lot of people are showing their true colors. And it's frightening. But again, that's why we got to stand firm. And again, that is never a call for violence. Blessed are the peacemakers. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to de-escalate. We are supposed to do whatever we are humanly capable of doing to show love. And the Bible is very big on that. But if you ask a lot of people, they'd never be able to tell you that, because they refuse, to educate themselves. They take somebody else's word that wants to keep them away from that. Why? Again, I say all the time, look what the world does to messengers of peace, love, unity. Not allowed to have that. So consider that. Thieves don't break into empty houses. The devil won't test you if you don't have an anointing. When you start to walk in your purpose, when you find what it is and you answer the call, you will be buffeted. Again, there's no promise that it's going to be easy, but it will be worth it. That's a guarantee. That's a promise. This has gone way over, and ironically, I thought this was going to be, one that I kept close to time, but then I got on a tangent. But again, over time, I do want to share my testimony, just bits and pieces, for now. So those are some of the important lessons that I've learned, or things that I carry with me, We live in difficult times. But there's a lot of wisdom that certain powers that be in this world don't want people to have an interest in. Think for yourself, why is that? Why are so many people turned away? Why do people go out of their way to twist what's in the Bible, to misuse it, to misrepresent it, to turn people away from it, to make them disinterested? Because there's something to it. And that doesn't even require faith for me to say. That's just logical, critical thinking. Although the faith is there. That's why I did that study on faith the other day. That was an important one. Again, just that faith the size of a mustard seed. It is not about quantity, it is about quality. When you get that, when you find that in yourself, that pure faith, that trust, when you can tap into that, watch and see what happens. Anyway, before this gets too much longer, take care of yourself. Keep trying to help take care of each other. And I'll see you in the next one.